tight battle going on. What about Edinburgh South? This is interesting, a three-way marginal with the Lib Dems right in the middle here. They want this too. And let me just take you to one more. Angus, the SNP at the moment would have to be pushed off the top slot by the Conservatives. Peter, I'm just going to bring you in on this last one as well. Renfrew Sheriff, this is a very key one for the Conservatives because they could see the Scottish Secretary of State, Jim Murphy, toppled here if they took this. Which of these is really looking possible or likely?
Well, I'm not sure any of them are. Dumfries and Galloway, the word is that the Conservatives haven't taken that. That was the Labour seat in Scotland with the smallest majority over to the Conservatives. We don't know what's happening in Angus. As for Edinburgh South, the word is that the Liberal Democrats seem to be taking that from Labour, not the Conservatives. Now, why does this matter? As you said, only one Conservative seat in Scotland. There may be just one or two at the end of the night. If there's a David Cameron minority government, he'll do it without any real help from Scotland. And in Scottish politics, what will they make of it? What will Alex Salmond, the First Minister, make of it when he says, look, we're run by a party that has practically no representation in Scotland. So it's not just, as it were, a cephalogically interesting thing that Scotland is behaving differently from England, but the political consequences of that difference could be very significant.
Yeah, a real constitutional headache, potentially. We'll leave that one for you.
Thanks very much, Emily. More scenes from Witney. David Cameron going to his count. Well, there's very little to see there, so I think we shouldn't stay there much longer. I'm joined here by Robert Peston, BBC's business editor, who's just come in. Mr. Peston, 1 o'clock, they're opening the bond markets. What's all this about? We've never had an election where they suddenly start trading shares and bonds and goodness knows what right in the middle of the election night, have we?
Well, look, David, as you know, the biggest challenge for any new government is to persuade investors that the government has a credible plan to reduce the UK's record deficit, its record borrowing. And investors plainly think that the efficacy of any plan to do that will affect the price of sterling and it'll affect the price of government bonds. And as soon as they've got the first inkling about what kind of government we're going to see, they want to trade. And that's why that market is open. That's why many banks and dealing rooms are fully, well, not fully staffed, but pretty staffed up as we speak.
And has it happened before this in other elections?
Look, markets are global, 24/7. Yes, it has happened in other elections. I think this is probably on a bigger scale because what's at stake for the UK is greater. Now, what's really interesting to me is we had the exit poll at 10 o'clock. Sterling had been weakening against the dollar all day, and that weakening continued after the exit poll. So plainly what investors are saying at this stage is that they fear that a hung parliament will make it harder to get a credible deficit plan through, which means challenges in terms of raising taxes or pushing through expenditure cuts, that those painful decisions will be harder to take.
We've had a result in from Kingswood in South Gloucestershire. This is a Conservative gain, the first Conservative gain of the night. Let's just hear the declaration. Or hear from the victor.
Thank you.
Chris
Firstly,
Skidmore.
I would like to thank on behalf of everyone here, the returning officer Stuart Hook. He's done a fantastic job tonight. All of the counting staff, you two, the police, and all of everyone who's worked so hard on the day to make this election count run as smoothly as possible. You've done a fantastic job. Tonight, the people of Kingswood have voted for change. They voted for a fresh start. After 13 years of a Labour government, they have voted for a new beginning under David Cameron and the Conservatives. If this result is replicated across the country, it will mean that there is a change in government, a Conservative government, with the majority needed to bring about change that is so desperately needed in this country.
Chris Skidmore, author, historian, he worked for Michael Gove, takes Kingswood. Now, this is an important result. It's the first indication of what might happen later. A Conservative gain from Labour, a swing from Labour to Conservative of 9.4%. In their target list for the Tories, this was above the level that Jeremy Vine was talking about, the 116 they needed to get an overall majority. This was 135th on their target list.
Yeah, they'll be delighted to get a seat like this, and were it to be repeated across the country, then they would sweep to power. All talk of hung parliament would be gone away. Of course, there are certain other places, though, that we're seeing. We saw that result in Arvon, where Plaid Cymru got a seat, where the swing away from Labour was rather smaller. The Tories not the big player there, Plaid Cymru and Labour, and therefore we may see regional patterns here, in which we've seen quite big swings in the North East to the Tories, a big swing here in Kingswood, but not perhaps repeated everywhere else. But that result will have them cracking champagne at Conservative Central Office, I think.
Maybe a bit premature to do that. But Emily, can we see Kingswood?
Yeah. Let's pull it up and have a look a bit more closely. You see, now you ask so sweetly, David, I can't. There you go. So looking at that change then, Conservatives nudging into first place. This has always been a bellwether seat, or for a long time been a bellwether seat, which tend to suggest this was the way the government would go. Still a pretty tight race. If I look at that as a change in the share.
Let's do the swing.
Yeah. A massive
That-
swing. I mean, really, this was on that sort of 6.9% swing that we talked about them technically needing for a parliamentary majority, and wow, they've way overshot that one.
They got it with votes to spare. And this is the sort of swing in this sort of seat which really would mean that David Cameron will be Prime Minister tomorrow night, possibly at the head of a majority government. If it's typical of Labour marginals, it's the first one we've had in. However, we are getting other news in, Emily.
I'm going to take you on to that one that you were mentioning. Another one, Basildon South. This is very, very tight, and everyone remembers it from 1992 as being the moment when we started thinking the story wasn't quite what we thought.
That was when Derek Amos was the victor very early on in the night. Tonight, we're hearing from both the Tory camp and the Labour camp that the Conservatives have taken Basildon South, and this will be coming out in the next half hour or so. It is one of these totemic seats. Now, of course, we want to see what the figures are, because it needs only a tiny swing. How the Conservatives have achieved a substantial swing, as they did in Kingswood, or have only just made it. But it does look as if the iconic seat of Basildon has gone Conservative.
Yeah, just to remind you, that's the 2005 show we're looking at now. We haven't had Basildon in yet, expecting that any moment, and Battersea as well. Another very, very tight, ultra-marginal, they call them. David.
Thanks, Emily. We may now be looking for or at an overall Conservative majority. Unlike what the exit poll said some time back, it's looking now feasible that the Tories will have an overall majority in the new Parliament. Let's join Jeremy Paxman.
Well, we're watching this with absolute rapt fascination. With three members of the House of Lords here, two former party leaders, Lord Kinnock, Lord Ashdown and Lady Varsi from the Conservatives. I mean, you must be really chuffed, aren't you, about this latest result, Kingswood, and the implications for Basildon?
I mean, it's a great result, that, because the swing that we needed was just under 7%.
Is this the Ashdown money at work, or?
Ashcroft, if you don't mind.
I'm so sorry. It's getting on.
That is libelous.
I think, to be fair, Jeremy, that's a story that's been and gone, and I think what we need
It
to
isn't a story
concentrate
that's been and gone. It's a story that may be bearing fruit tonight.
It's
So
a
that's the
story
reform
that
we're going to get
Well,
here.
actually, if you look at the way that candidates have been campaigning, and I've seen most of them in the last 2.5 years, in terms of the amount of door knocking that they're doing, in terms of the people that they've had contact with, that's got nothing to do with money. That's actually got to do with how hard those candidates have worked.
You look at this result and you think about Basildon, and you think about what you felt when you heard the news in Basildon when it went. What do you feel?
Yes, Calais is written on my heart. Basildon is certainly written on mine. It could be a bellwether. It'll be interesting to see how big the swing was, because the margin last time wasn't great. And I still think we're a fair way out from getting a conclusive result. The one in Kingswood was a big swing, but I think there might be
looked
particular
bad for Labour,
additional
this result.
local factors. It's not good. It's not good.
What do you make of what's happening tonight?
Well, my first conclusion is your opinion poll was rubbish, Jeremy. It underestimated, I think, the Conservatives, and it underestimated the Lib Dems. That's my first. And by the way, from the start of this evening, I didn't think we were in for a hung parliament. I think we're in for a small majority.
I must just warn you,
but
we're
that's
about to
just-
go to Torbay at any moment, but I know you'll be fascinated to see that
Indeed,
result,
I
but
will.
I think you can carry on talking until the returning officer there looks as if she's about to open her mouth. But
However, if indeed there is a hung parliament, it's clear what the Tory strategy is. It is to write a narrative of victory based on Labour's failure.
okay,
And
I'm
their
going to take you out
presumption
there.
is that-
She's speaking.
Elizabeth Rates, being the acting returning officer for the Torbay constituency, do hereby give notice that
Torbay then, held by the Liberal Democrats with a majority of nearly 3,000.
is as follows. Anne Patricia Conway, British National Party, 709. Simon Alexander Moss, Green Party, 468. Julian Henry Parrott, UK Independence Party, 2,628. David Hedrick Friend, the Labour Party candidate, 3,231. Adrian Mark Sanders, Liberal Democrat, 23,126. Charles Marcus Alexander Wood, the Conservative Party candidate, 19,048.
Let's hold Torbay.
Ballot papers, and I hereby declare that Adrian Mark Sanders is duly elected. The turnout was 64.6%.
So the turnout, 64.6, you said, it was 60 before, so it's gone up a bit. Adrian Sanders, who is Deputy Chief Whip for the Liberal Democrats, been the MP there since 1997. And here are the figures. There's his raw majority. Let's just have a look at the share of the vote and the change of the vote there. Conservatives on 39%, and the swing Conservative to, it's a 1.1% swing. Liberal Democrats to Conservative. No, Conservative to Lib Dems, I should say.
Perfectly illustrates how we're going to get different pictures in different parts of the country. This was 57th on the list of seats that the Tories wanted and need to get in order to have a majority. So on the one hand, they do not get that, and a very small swing away from them. On the other hand, we saw Kingswood, where they get this massive swing. It's one that isn't on their list of key targets to form a majority that they do get.
I mean, I assume a pattern will emerge from this in the end. I mean, people will look back at this election in a month or two and we'll see things. I don't know how
it may be a pattern of a series of two-party races, of course, David. You may find that Tories against Liberal Democrats perform in one way, the Tories against Labour perform in another, and so on and so forth.
Well, Emily and Peter Kellner are the geniuses at this, and will be able to tell us. Oh, sorry, Emily.
Geniuses on our own.
It was working so well before.
Shall I kick it? Come back to us when we've got it up.
Oh, all right. Yes, Vernon.
This is the first indication we've had, I think, of a slight setback to Conservative hopes. Previous results against Labour have indicated.
Go on.
Previous results have indicated an overall majority for the Conservatives. But if they cannot win Liberal Democrat seats in the southwest, they have to win more seats from Labour. So there's a slight possibility there. I wouldn't put too much strength on it, that the Conservative advance may be checked.
Let's go down to Putney in southwest London.
Yes, again, I must have take advice from the Chief Executive. What do I do?
Declare the result. They've gone home to commiserate.
I think they must have gone home. To do there.
That one.
Martha Khan is there. I don't know whether she can hear us. Martha?
I can, David, and that's Jane Cooper in her regalia. She's about to announce the results of Putney, the seat in southwest London.
I, Jane Cooper, being the returning officer at the parliamentary election for the Putney constituency, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Peter Darby, British National Party, 459. Justin Greening, the Conservative Party candidate, 21,223. Stuart Thomas King, the Labour Party candidate, 11,170. Bruce William David Mackenzie, Green Party, 591. James Peter Charles Sandbach, Liberal Democrats, 6,907. Frederick Hugo Joel Wareham, UK Independence Party, 435. I therefore declare that Justine Greening is elected to serve as a Member of Parliament for the constituency of Putney. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few
So
words?
Putney, Conservative hold Putney, and Justine Greening, the Shadow Communities Local Government Minister, one of the Vice Chairmen, one of the many Vice Chairmen of the Conservative Party. Justine Greening, just about to speak there. Let's just see the swing there.
I'd first of all, of course, like to thank the returning officer.
Swing of 9.9%.
People who counted the
from
ballot
Labour to the
papers so quickly
Conservatives.
here in Wandsworth. I know you've got many, many more.
Majority goes up by 8,000.
It was the greatest privilege of my life to be elected to represent Putney, Roehampton, and
I've got another result from North Down in County
Jeanette
Down.
Murray, being the Deputy Returning Officer for the North Down
Sylvia Herman.
constituency, declare that the number of votes for each candidate at the election was as follows. Stephen Agnew, 1,043, 1043. Stephen Farry, 1,876, 1876. Sylvia Herman, 21,181, 21181. Kay Kilpatrick, 1,634, 1634. Liam Logan, 680, 680. Vincent Parker, 250, 250. Ian James Parsley, 6,817, 6817. There were 62 rejected ballot papers, and I declare that Sylvia Herman has been elected to serve in Parliament for the North Down constituency.
So Lady Herman refused to stand under the Conservative banner here and stood as an independent. And Ian Parsley, it's not a misprint for Paisley, Ian Parsley, who stood for the Unionists and Conservatives, is in second place, well below her. She's done very well there. Her majority was 5,000 before, it's now nearly 15,000.
What can I say to the people of North Down? I am just overwhelmed.
So, Jeremy Vine, you have something for us.
Yes, David. We're going to have a look and see what happens when we compare the exit poll figures that we've got with the real results coming in. And we'll focus specifically on these 6 constituencies we've seen in the northeast of England. So on the wall you see the swingometer set at 0 with the seats in the colours that they were left by the last general election, Conservatives and Labour seats in blue and red. And the exit poll gave us this figure for national swing, 5.5%, not enough for the Conservatives. They need 6.97% for an overall majority. But is that the actual figure? Well, we're now getting results in, and I can show you now the seats in the northeast of England. I'll identify them, highlight them. There are 19 seats, and 17 of them are Labour, an absolute Labour heartland area. And the swing to the Conservatives in the northeast is very different from the exit poll swing, which we've got nationally. Have a look at this. So a massive 8.4% to the Conservatives, well enough if that was spread nationally for them to become the government with an overall majority. And it actually gives them 2 seats here. You can see if these come in Conservative, it'll be borne out. Stockton South, Darry Taylor would lose his seat there. And then Tynemouth, you can see where Alan Campbell is the Labour MP. Now, you can see those 2 seats won for Labour in 1997 in Tony Blair's landslide. Will part of the story tonight be the unravelling of some of Labour's massive gains in that election 13 years ago? Let's have a look at the Liberal Democrats in the same area. Liberal Democrats against Labour in the northeast of England. Again, I'll highlight the constituencies for you. And again, let's take a look, if we can, at what the exit poll told us about their performance nationally. 3.5% swing, Liberal Democrat to Labour. And what happens if we look at the northeast seats and the swing there? Again, it's much higher. Liberal Democrats taking chunks out of Labour, 6.7%, and they would gain Durham, big student city, would go Liberal Democrat. Roberta Blackman-Woods would cease being the Labour MP. So, fascinating story from the northeast. A Labour heartland, hugely strong area for the Labour Party, but it turns out their support there may have been more vulnerable to attack from the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats than maybe anyone thought. David.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Let's go down to the river again and join Andrew Neil. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Let's go down to the river again.
My next guest here on the boat is Alistair Campbell. I look over your shoulder and see Big Ben says 120. How bad does it look for Labour at this time in the morning?
Well, I still don't think you can tell. I thought it was interesting what Jeremy was saying there about seats where Labour maybe would have thought they'd done better, where they've obviously not done as well as maybe we'd have hoped. But I still think that it's far, far too early to call.
But Mr. Brown hasn't won.
Well, look, we lost a lot of seats. There's no doubt about that, and the Kingswood was a bad result as well. But the reality is, the Conservatives not long ago were expecting to be way home and dry by now, and they're not.
If Mr. Cameron comes first, but without an overall majority, should Mr. Brown try and form a coalition with the Lib Dems?
Well, let's just see what happens. I think every.
Well, Downing Street sources are already telling us that, Alistair.
Well, I imagine that everybody will be thinking about all the different options that are going to come.
What would you advise?
Well, look, if Labour and the Liberals could do a deal, and if there is no overall, if the Tories can't form the government, then that's obviously an option that people are going to look at.
But Gordon Brown would clearly have lost.
Let's see how the results
He never got elected as leader of the Labour Party. He never got elected as Prime Minister. He's now lost, and you're saying he should stay in power.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying let's wait and see what the results are.
Supposing it is Labour second,
Andrew,
Liberals third.
Before too long, we're going to know. Before too long, we're going to know.
But it is significant that Downing Street is already putting out to the Press Association and the BBC and others that, if possible, Mr. Brown will seek to form a coalition.
I think what they're probably doing is trying to counter. I saw Paddy Ashdown talking a few moments ago about this narrative that the Tories are trying to create, that they are forming the next government. George Osborne, I've just come from ITV, George Osborne was doing an interview effectively saying they've won the election. The election is not over. Nobody has won the election yet.
Sure.
All the party leaders are going to have to reflect on the results as they come in.
The one thing we do know is that Labour hasn't won it.
I think it'd be very, very... Even though I'm not going to say that Labour might form a majority government in the morning, but what I can say is it's not that long ago that every single commentator, yourself probably included, thought the Tories were going to be home and dry, and they've not actually had that good a campaign. They're not where they want to be. They're not where they think they should be.
This must be a sad night for you, because in a sense this is the end of 13 years of New Labour.
Well, look,
it's over.
I can remember. No, it's not. It's certainly not over for New Labour by any manner of means. What I think is extraordinary, if we were to win this election tonight,
you're not.
If we had won this election tonight, we'd have been only the third party in 2 centuries to win 4 terms. And if you remember back in 1992. Lots and lots of people said we were never going to win again. We won in 97 with the landslide, another one in 2001 and again in 2005. So Labour has got a lot to be proud of. And I think actually it's interesting. I think if one of the lessons of this election already is that Britain is a progressive country. It doesn't really want
Let
a
me
big
just
Conservative
interrupt you.
government
We're looking at pictures of Gordon Brown. He's at his Kirkcaldy constituency now, shaking hands with various people. That is one seat that I think we can be pretty sure will stay Labour tonight when we get the results.
Certainly hope so.
If Mr. Cameron does form a minority government or an overall majority government, Gordon Brown goes as Labour leader.
Well, again, let's wait and see what happens. I mean, I think Gordon has made it clear throughout this campaign that, he's a big guy, he'll take responsibility, but I'm not going to speculate beyond that.
Who would you like to see as the next Labour leader?
And I'm not going to answer that one either, I'm sorry.
That's a perfectly legitimate question.
It's a perfectly legitimate question.
You've been a kingmaker in the Labour Party before.
I'm not going to answer it. I think that, look, there's a long way to go tonight. There have been some very interesting results already. I thought the Torbay was an interesting one, and I think that Vernon was right that it's not all going the Tories' way.
Alistair Campbell, I'm going to interrupt you there because we're going to go straight back to David at the studio.
Thanks very much, Andrew. John Simpson has been with Gordon Brown this evening. John, if you can hear me, can you cast any light or throw any light on this report that Mr. Brown has said he'll try to form a coalition if there's a hung parliament, according to Labour Party sources?
Well, certainly I've been talking to people very close to Gordon Brown, and that is certainly the kind of the Gordon Brown line. Now, I mean, it's confused because indeed some of his own spokesmen say they don't know anything about it, etc. But as I understand it, the line is Gordon Brown remains Prime Minister. He will, I now think, perhaps you can even see me. I'm not sure. Perhaps you're just still seeing Gordon.
Looks like you. Looks like you. Sounds like you. I think it's you. Yes. There you are, John.
Yes. No, I'm the one with the white hair. Yes.
No, that's me.
He says he's the prime minister. Of course, constitutionally, he gets the right to see if he can form a government. That's why you're hearing all these things that are coming out to the Liberal Democrats. You know, yes, of course, we're really interested in electoral reform, and we're on the same side. Really, we're the natural partners of the Liberal Democrats and so forth. That's what, as I understand it, Gordon Brown's line is. Whether that's trickled through to every member of his team, well, it doesn't seem to. But that's
no, because the line here, the line that we're getting from apparently from number 10, I'll bring Nick in on this. He'll know, is that he'd try to form a coalition government. Not that it's possible.
The Press Association have reported Downing Street sources saying this. I've just been talking to someone who works very closely with Gordon Brown, who's trying to downplay it. Frankly, you don't need to talk to anybody. It's blindingly obvious. Every single Labour spokesman that's come on this programme since the moment the programme began has flattered the Liberal Democrats, called for electoral reform, and said the Tories haven't won and that it would be helpful if they could work with other people for a stable government. They are saying in great bright red lights with the klaxon going, come to us. We want to do a deal, they're saying to the Liberal Democrats. Now, of course, what we don't know is whether the seats that will be declared tonight will allow them to have the chance to do that.
Well, Gordon Brown there at the count, and we'll have his result when it comes through. Meantime, we've got a result from Wales I'd just like to see. Vale of Clwyd, first of all, in Denbighshire. Labour held on to this. This was just outside the range that the Tories were hoping to take if they wanted that 116. He's been there since 97. And the swing, 3.6% to the Conservatives. And Anglesey, Ynys Môn, again a swing, this time from Plaid Cymru to Labour. Labour to Plaid Cymru, 1.8%. And Arfon, which we had a moment before, I think, Labour to Plaid Cymru, 3.7%. There we are, that's the Arfon result. So there's a 3 Welsh results in. We're getting more from Wales and Northern Ireland than we are from England. Nick?
It suggests, our analysts are telling us behind the scenes, that you're getting a slightly lower swing to the Conservatives in Wales. Now, remember, the Tory party set a target of 10 at one stage, Welsh gains that they wanted to make in order to get a majority. It would not suggest that they would be able to do that on the sorts of figures we're seeing in Wales, and once again reinforces this idea that you're getting different swings in different regions.
It means the Conservative government will be very much an English government. And Peter Kellner made an interesting point a little while ago. The Conservatives will be the third or possibly even the fourth party in Scotland. How will that play when you have an SNP leader of a government in Scotland who says that Scotland has a let-out from the expenditure cuts of a Conservative government by voting for independence? The strains between England and Scotland are likely to increase very considerably, in my judgment, as a result of this election.
Well, it will certainly be a conundrum. Anyway, we're waiting for more to come in. We've got 326, the winning place. You see how few have so far come in. 11 Labour, 4 Conservative, 2 Liberal, 8 others. Jeremy.
Well, David, thank you very much. We're joined now by David Blunkett, who's in Sheffield. David Blunkett, are you entirely comfortable with the idea of Gordon Brown hanging on to Downing Street as the result of some sort of deal?
Well, there are 2 provisos. Firstly, only the Prime Minister can concede defeat or decide that he would like to try and reach a deal with others. And secondly, that is entirely dependent on whether the Conservatives get an overall majority. And my own view, at this very, very early stage with the swings we're seeing, is that it's quite likely that the Conservatives will make it, or they'll be so close to it that the decision will be taken. You see, back in 1992, I remember my colleagues going till 5 and 6 in the morning, spouting the line that was put to them on their pages, and the electorate outside and the Chatterati being completely bewildered. And I think within 2 hours we'll know pretty well whether the Conservatives have made it or not. And at that point, people actually might be able to talk something sensible.
But your instinct is that Labour has lost this election.
My instinct is that we regrettably have lost the election, but that we should go for uniting the anti-conservative forces, if we are in opposition, I say if we are, in a way that tries to minimise the damage they can do to our economy, to our social policy, to the well-being of the people who have voted for us in the election yesterday, and above all, to stop what happened in the 1980s in my city, which was the destruction of the fabric of the community and the well-being of people in terms of their employment. And that should be our primary task as a party that will, of course, whether in coalition with others or not, will be renewing itself, will be reconnecting, will be speaking the language of people we represent.
David, thank you very much. Paddy Ashdown, what advice would you be giving Nick Clegg tonight?
Don't listen to a hoary old warhorses sitting on the back seat, and one of them is me.
Okay, thank you very much, David.
Listen, let me give you. Perhaps if you put me against a wall.
Hang on, I'm going to have to cut across you because people want the results, and we've got one coming in, David.
Okay.
Liberal Democrats held on to Fife North East. Interesting, David Blunkett, the first senior Labour Party member, to say that in his opinion, Labour has lost this election. We go to the city of Durham for a declaration. Held by Labour, majority of 3,000.
Yes, I am.
Liberal Democrats in second place.
Labour have held this. Okay.
Well, this has been held by Labour since 1935, this seat. The old SDP came close to taking it in the 80s. It's the most marginal seat for Labour against the Liberal Democrats in the North East, and I wish they'd get on with announcing it.
Win this seat, the Liberal Democrats will be quite disappointed. Nick Clegg's final rally before arriving home in Sheffield was in Durham. It was a target they wanted. They want to have a real presence in the North East. They run the council in Newcastle, and their argument had been if they had trouble against the Conservatives in the south of England, that they could do well against Labour in the north of England. So Liberal Democrats don't get this seat. It will be confirmation of the picture coming out of our exit poll that this isn't as good a night as they might have hoped for.
Can't imagine what they're waiting for. They all seem to be standing there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates. Oh, here she comes.
I, Colette Longbottom, being the acting returning officer at the parliamentary election for the City of Durham constituency held on the 6th of May 2010, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Blackman, Woods, Roberta Carroll, the Labour Party candidate, 20,496. Coghill, Marshall, Nigel Revel, UK Independence Party, 856. Collins, Jonathan Charles, Independent, 172. Musgrave, Ralph Steve.
The electorate was 73,534. Going up to Kirkcaldy for the Prime Minister's result, and we'll come back to Durham
Rejected papers 60, and the percentage
after we've had this result from Kirkcaldy.
37%. I, Ronnie Hines, returning officer, give notice that the total number of votes cast for each candidate in the election was as follows. Peter Adams, UK Independence Party, 760. Susan Archibald, Independent, 184. Gordon Brown, Scottish Labour Party, 29,559. Douglas Chapman, Scottish National Party, 6,550. Derek Jackson, Land is Power, 57. McLaren of McLaren, Independent, 165. John Mainland, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 4,269. And Lindsay Patterson, Scottish Conservative and Unionist, 4,258. I declare Gordon Brown elected to serve in Parliament as a member for the Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath constituency.
hope we'll be able to hear from Gordon Brown. Yes, he's got notes for his speech coming out, so he holds his seat safely. His majority goes up by nearly 5,000 votes.
Thank my fellow candidates for the dignified manner in which they have fought this campaign. And can I thank this great college, of which I'm proud to be and remain the Chancellor, and which is now a central focus of our whole community life. I want to thank the staff for what they have done to give us a great welcome. And let me tonight thank the returning officer and the staff who have administered this count with such speed and courtesy and care, ensuring that everyone who has met the rules has had the chance to vote, as I hope and believe is the right of citizens everywhere throughout our country. Let me say to the people of this great constituency, there is no greater privilege than to serve in Parliament the people you have grown up with, men and women you've gone to school with, whose children have also grown up here. A few yards from here is the home in which I grew up as I was young. Immediately across the road from here is the church where my father preached and where I first began to learn about social justice. And decades ago, I learned here in Kirkcaldy something that has never left me.